There's something magical about a tiny cabin glowing in the snow, and today we're turning that feeling into a watercolor painting. This winter scene is beginner-friendly and full of atmosphere. So take your brushes and let's bring this cozy moment to life. I'll start by mixing a green shade. I'm using yellow and turquoise green, but you can use other colors like phthalo green, emerald green, green lights, or any bright bluish green. Then I'll wet the entire paper except for the cabin. Since the roof will be covered in snow and have more bluish tone, I'll carefully wet around it. Next, I'll apply the green mix in the center, avoiding the cabin. Now I'll start moving the paper up and down and let the paint flow. Keep an eye on how it goes. My paper wasn't wet enough, so it didn't turn out as I wanted. But that's fine, let's move on. After the paper is completely dry, I'll wet it again for the next step. I'll use Indigo to paint the night sky. I'm using it very concentrated to be dark, but fluid enough to flow. Then, using a flat brush, I'll drag the paint down in vertical strokes in different lengths. Don't worry too much now, we'll tilt the paper and make the paint flow down. Again, keep an eye on it so it doesn't go down too much. I'll pick the excess paint and we're done here. After the paper is dry, I'll wet the snow area and also the cabin. We'll paint the windows lights now. I'm using a mix of yellow and golden deep. Then I'll paint the reflections of the lights on the snow. Next, I'll add permanent rose to the outer part of the reflection to avoid it turning green when we paint the blue tones of the snow. I'll intensify the light a bit next to the house. Now I'll wet the dry paper in the snow area. I'm mixing blue, gray, and indigo. Using a flat brush, I'll start painting the bottom, the left and right corners. I'll leave some areas white to create depth. Then, I switch to a small round brush to paint around the light's reflection. The darker the blue around the reflections, the more the lights will shine. Now I'm going to paint some pine trees, and here I'm indicating where they will be. I'm painting a thin line with just water and whitening some spots on the tree because I want to suggest some snow. Then, using a mix of blue-gray and indigo, I'll start making short strokes for the pointy edges. Then, some diagonal strokes. Again, pointy edges. And more diagonal strokes. The light spots suggest the trees are slightly covered with snow. Then, I'll use a damp brush to connect the tree with the snow field. Now, I'll repeat the same process for all the other trees. There are, actually, lots of ways to paint pine trees. I'm always testing, observing, and practicing to see which way I like the most. I always try to find a way that feels more intuitive and allows me to paint quickly but beautifully. Notice that I paint the edges of the tree on dry paper, dragging the brush to the center. I just keep an eye on whether the tree still has a triangular shape, otherwise I fix it. I feel I need some trees behind the house so it looks more lively. I'm always trying to find a quick and effortless way to paint things, but still looking beautiful and soft. That's why I love this medium. It's forgiving and expressive at the same time. And speaking about forgiving, a lot of people say watercolor is unforgiving, which I partially disagree with. Once you understand how it works, it's very rewarding and even addictive. I'll add a bigger tree in this corner to balance the whole composition. I try not to make the trees too uniform, and not too weird either. That requires some practice and observation. Since I'm using just one color here, I'll vary the lights and darks to make the trees look more interesting. I love how watercolor captures not just the scene, but the feeling of a moment, the quietness, the mood. The way colors blend together creates something beyond shapes and lines. Now, I'll wet the roof to create a softer texture. I'm using what's left on my palette from when I painted the snow area. Then, I'll make a darker mix of blue-gray and indigo to enhance the shadows. And I'll use a damp brush to keep everything soft. Now we'll paint the house. You can use masking fluid to protect the windows, but today I will not. I'll just paint around them. First, I'll wet the house, except the windows. Then, I'll mix permanent red light and burnt sienna. Since I'm painting on wet paper, I don't need to worry about hard lines. There are ways to paint on dry paper as well, but I'll show you in another video. Here, I'll paint the chimney using more concentrated indigo. And I'll add some shadows to give it volume. Before I continue, I'll dry everything completely with a hairdryer. Then I'll wet the house again because we'll use darker colors. I'm using burnt sienna and ultramarine here to paint the areas where the shadows are more intense. But I try not to paint them right next to the lit windows. I'll add another layer of shadows, still avoiding touching the windows. I'll also add shadows on one side of the chimney. And on the front of the house. Now I'll paint the door using a white gel pen. You can use gouache as well. And I'll add a window too. Here, I'll paint one more pine tree. I'll use the same process as before, but this time I'll add some yellow glow. I made the scene a little more whimsical, so it's not too detailed or complicated, and it still conveys that cozy feeling. Now, we have a little Christmas tree. Using a mix of blue-gray and indigo, I'll paint a snow path. And with a smaller brush, I'll add shadow in one of the sides. Finally, I'll sprinkle white gouache on the sky for the stars. And below for falling snow. And our magic night is done. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.